This is the Skin in the Game VC podcast, hosted by Tom Wallace, entrepreneur turned venture capitalist and the managing partner at Florida Funders, along with Saxon Baum, general partner and head of investor relations at Florida Funders. You'll learn from the best about investing in early stage tech companies, so you too can gain the confidence and find the tools that help you succeed as an angel investor. Are you ready to get some skin in the game?
Hello, everybody. Tom Wallace here with another edition of Florida Funders Skin in the Game podcast. Saxon, how are we doing today?
Tom, great to see you. Always happy to be here. And as always, we have an amazing guest today.
Yes, we do. And we're excited. We'll get into that in a second. For those of you who are new to the pod, we do this a couple times a month, and we like to have exciting guests on. And what we really are here to do is learn from each other and learn from some really bright people about what's going on in technology, what's going on in the industry. And we gear this to both our investors and to our founders. And so, again, welcome. Sax, kick us off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was lucky enough to meet our guest via one of our mutual friends, Zaid Rahman, who is the CEO of Flex, a company that our fund too is heavily invested in. So welcome today, Brent Saunders. Brent, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. And we're happy to have you. Before we get into the nitty gritty of the pod, something that's near and dear to Tom and I's heart is we're both from Pittsburgh. And I know you went to the University of Pittsburgh. So what's your fondest memory of the great city of Pittsburgh?
Oh, I have so many. It was a great college experience for me, but probably the one that stands out the most is in 1991, I was president of the student body. And I had the absolute pleasure of being the student host for Nelson Mandela when he came to Pittsburgh.
Wow.
And got to spend time with him, have a meal with him, go to his speech that he gave in Pittsburgh back then. And it was this was before he became president. He had just come out of jail, and it was just a remarkable experience seeing someone of such greatness, but such humility at the same time.
You know, I thought you were going to say like fries at the Dirty O or something like that.
Well, the Dirty O was definitely a reason I probably gained 20 pounds in college.
Or some Steeler game, but Nelson Mandela.
That's
wow.
amazing.
That's a real that's what an amazing human being. And to spend time with him before he was president. Jeez.
Yeah.
So any quick takeaways from that your time with him?
Yeah, it really, and it actually stayed with me to this day, but just his absolute humility. He was just a regular guy. He spoke very plainly. He was very at ease around me. It was hosted by, at the time, the chairman and CEO of Heinz, which was based in Pittsburgh. And, whether he was with, these companies are no longer as big as they were, then as they are today. But Westinghouse and Heinz and the CEOs and chair people and a lot of the board members were all there. And then there was just a student like me, and he treated us all as equals and took the time to really, talk to you. It was just truly remarkable how humble he was.
I actually have a picture of him hanging in my house. Big fan. That had to be an incredible
remarkable leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went to school at Pitt. Are you from Pittsburgh, Brian?
I'm not. I grew up on the east side of Pennsylvania.
Oh, you're on the bad side of the state. Oh,
well, it depends what you say, right? But I view Penn State as the bad part of the state. But I grew up in Allentown, outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania, in a fairly, at the time, rural area.
Yeah, sure. So where did you go after Pitt? Tell us your story.
So after Pitt, I moved to Philadelphia, stayed in Pennsylvania, and I went to both Temple Law School and Temple Business School at night, and worked at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital throughout most of that time. And that's really how I got connected to healthcare. and from there.
Well, tell everybody what you do now, and then we can, what you're doing now, and then I think they can.
Sure. So I do a lot of things, but the thing I spend the vast majority of my time on is being chairman and CEO of a company called Bausch and Lomb, which is a 170-year-old eye health company. And so we make everything from contact lenses to laser to implants after surgery to pharmaceuticals. And then, of course, most of the things you see in the eye care aisle at the drugstore.
Yeah. So how many employees does this little company, Bausch and Lomb, have?
So we have about just under 14,000. And we have an office here in Miami, but we also have a fairly big footprint in Florida. We have a very large pharmaceutical plant in Tampa, and then we make a lot of the intraocular lenses or implants after cataract surgery in Clearwater.
Oh, wow.
And so we have a really big commitment to the state of Florida.
Is Miami the headquarters?
So I don't like the word headquarters. I always view headquarters as places that bureaucracy goes to grow and decisions go to die.
I like that. That's good.
So
I might steal that.
I got rid of the idea of a headquarters when I joined here, and same was true as my last job as chairman and CEO of Allergan. And so we have a substantial presence in New Jersey. We have a hub here in Miami, and we have a hub in Irvine, California, predominantly R&D. But we also have offices in 80, 90 countries around the world. So we're a dispersed company with offices around the world.
Yeah.
Got it. So to Tom's point, let's now go back to you graduate Pitt, move to Philly, working in the hospital system. The journey that you've had is amazing, and it's nothing short of insanely impressive. Can you take us through that journey? Yeah,
so I'll give you the short strokes of the last almost, whatever it's been, 25, 27 years. So after school, I continued working at the hospital for a while. And then I went into consulting at Pricewaterhouse Consulting and became a partner very quickly and was doing quite well there, focusing on the pharmaceutical industry. Ultimately, a client came to me, a company called Shearing Plow at the time, came to me and asked me if I would come in and join their executive team, the CEO. I said no a few times, but after a while thinking about it, I really wanted to get into business versus consulting. I actually wanted to do versus advise. And I joined Shearing Plow. I worked there for roughly 8 years and worked my way up to president of the company. And it was a really good run. I ran their consumer health business. So it was products like Claritin, Dr. Scholl's, Coppertone, and then a bunch of other products like Afrin and Miralax and a whole bunch of consumer health products globally.
Some of the most well-known Walgreens, CVS products out there.
Exactly. And at the time, they were all market leaders. And one of the big things is I brought a lot of those products to China. And so that's when I really learned about how to build a business in China, which was interesting.
I'll bet. So speaking of the Walgreens and CVS's and Rite Aids of the world, I remember reading the book Good to Great, that landmark book and business book that I think everybody's probably read. And Walgreens was like one of the featured companies of, the great companies. Now it's heavily laden with debt, almost, may go private. I think Rite Aid went bankrupt. What happened to the retail pharmacy industry? Is Amazon just crushing them online? And how do you look at that?
Multifactorial. So, back in the day, Walgreens was always known as having the best pharmacy or pharmacist, and CVS was known as a great retailer. And I think you're right. I think Amazon certainly had some impact, but I think it goes beyond that. I think when you look at what happened to those companies, when you think about just the pharmacy itself, the shopping experience there has gotten quite difficult. As you know, most things are behind glass, and with the labor market being tough as it has been for the last few years, there's not enough staff to open the glass, and so that experience has become difficult. And
yeah,
then
they make it painful to buy razor blades. I'll say that.
right.
Shouldn't be painful to buy razor blades. Seems like a commodity to me, but what do I know?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the theft prevention has really hit that retail experience hard. The other, as they looked at expanding, right, they probably expanded too rapidly, and so there's a Walgreens or CVS on virtually every corner, it feels like. And then I think the third thing is they all expanded into different lines of businesses. CVS bought Aetna and Caremark. Walgreens also expanded their distribution capabilities and other things outside the U.S. And so, I think it's just been a tough macro environment, and I'm not sure it gets easier in the short term for them. But they have some good new leaders in all those companies, and certainly rooting for them to get back to where they were.
And are you guys, Brent, with your business now, is it majorly sold through retail, or is it more online D2C?
No, roughly, Bausch Lomb has 4 business units, and we're pretty evenly balanced between the 4. And so about, 1/4 of it is consumer health. And the drug channel is important, but so is Walmart and Target. And of course, Amazon and Walmart.com are pretty big channels for us. In the pharmaceutical, the prescription business, clearly CVS and Walgreens are important places for patients to go to pick up their prescription, but there's also a lot of specialty pharmacies and mail order as distribution partners. On the surgical side, the surgeon and the surgery centers are predominantly the customers. And then in vision care, contact lenses, it's predominantly either your optometrist, your chain store optometrist, or some of the big retail partners like Walmart and Costco.
Got it. When I look at the healthcare industry and our healthcare system in the United States, I think a lot of people would say, maybe it's broken, or it has a lot of room for improvement, and technology seems to be where a lot of those efficiencies might come from. And we've invested at Florida Funders in a lot of healthcare startups. We love the space and the digitization, and healthcare seems to be over the years slow adopters to technology. And, I'd kind of be, now with AI coming into healthcare, I'd be interested to hear from you, Brent, from your seat, much different than ours. How do you see technology impacting healthcare and AI impacting healthcare and our healthcare system changing in the coming 5-10 years?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I'm optimistic that we can continue to improve the efficiency of a fairly inefficient healthcare system. That being said, healthcare is difficult and sometimes slow adopters of technology, and a lot of it is based around the regulation or regulatory environment that surrounds healthcare, and the disparities that sit within healthcare. And so, for example, if we had a universal medical record that could be shared and portable and owned by the patient, think about the efficiency that could be gained by that.
Just have everything in one single pane of glass, be able to see it.
And just
have it on your phone, And companies have tried to do this. Apple has tried to do it. Others have tried to do it, but it is really difficult. The interoperability between your record at the hospital when you go for a procedure versus your primary care doctor versus your specialist versus perhaps where you go for your MRI or your X-ray. These things aren't portable, and those systems are in many cases antiquated or proprietary, and they don't talk to each other. And so, from my humble point of view, I think if I could wave a magic wand or ask the government to focus on one thing, it would be creating this portable universal health record. I think from there you could build a lot of
Brent,
applications.
I'm
and
sorry to
efficiency
interrupt
for
you,
the
but do any other countries have universal health record?
I'm not aware of any. I
Okay.
think, though, to be fair, I think when you go into some of these nationalized health systems like the UK, I'm pretty sure they must, right? The National Health Services, there's one provider of healthcare, right?
Yeah.
And so they must have. It may not be 100% a universal record. It may not be owned by the patient, but there's a much more cohesive system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've seen a few companies, even early stage, trying to do that. I think, Brent, to your point, it's very hard when you have these disparate systems that are very much so regulated by the government to be able to talk to each other. And so I think, to your point, if you could get there, that would be amazing. Going back to your career, once again, been nothing short of incredible. You've had several multi-billion-dollar transactions that you have led and been a huge part of. Can you talk a little bit about some of those transactions and some of the war stories and some of the good stories that have come out of that? Most people in their career maybe do one or two transactions, let alone several multi-billion-dollar transactions that you've really been at the helm of.
Yeah, I think I've done just shy of $300 billion of M&A over the last 20 years.
You got me by a few zeros.
Yeah, and I had a big one that didn't get over the finish line, was interrupted by the government, which was the merger of Allergan with Pfizer. But I've done a lot of deals, and I have a kind of a general formula for M&A, and I always start with strategic logic, and then once you can pass that screen, right? What makes 1 + 1 equal something greater than 2, right? What's the strategic rationale for the deal, and how strong is that rationale? And then, of course, the financial metrics, become the next big test, right? But if you can't get past a strong strategic rationale, there's no point in doing the financials, right? Because even if you can pencil it out, it won't be a great deal at the end for either the buyer or the seller if it doesn't have a great rationale behind it. And so, when I look at most of the deals, I feel very confident about that rationale. There were a few, namely, I was CEO of Bausch Lomb once before, 2010 to 2013, mid 2013. And that was in a private equity owned situation. Bausch Lomb was private equity owned. And in that case, it was really about, private equity isn't permanent equity. And so there had to be an exit. And so that transaction was about just maximizing the return for the private equity firm and their LPs. But otherwise, outside of that one deal, most of the deals I've done have had very strategic rationale. And the best series of ones I can think of is in 2013 when I sold Bausch Lomb. The first time I went to a small, predominantly neuroscience-based company in New York City called Forest Labs as the CEO. It was known for innovations like Lexapro and Namenda for Alzheimer's. And I then used that company over the course of almost 10 years to do 200+ billion of M&A, which created up till 2020 what people know as Allergan. I renamed the company a few times along the way, but at the end of the day, we wound up selling Allergan to AbbVie for a total value of about 83 billion. And so, people know that company predominantly for Botox, the maker of Botox, but it was a great 10-year run, really using M&A to create value for shareholders.
When the stakes get higher and the dollars become so much more throughout these deals, what are some of the core differentiators in those deals? Or are they very similar, just a few more zeros to Tom's point?
Yeah, you know what I always say, and it may sound perverse in some ways, but bigger deals are, if you stay true to your ideals, right? Strategic logic, financial discipline. Bigger deals are sometimes easier than smaller deals. And I'll give an example. When I was at shearing plow, we wound up selling to Merck. And Merck bought us predominantly for our cardiovascular franchise. At the time, we had a drug called Zetia for cholesterol management, and we had a partnership with them for a drug called Vytorin, which was a combination of Zocor and Zetia. And we had a late-stage program, another cardiovascular drug in phase 3 testing, and that was the one they were most interested in. They were zeroing in on that. But we also had an animal health business, we had the consumer business, and we had a lot of other franchises in different disease states. But they zeroed in on that cardiovascular. Interestingly, after they bought us, I think the price was around $40 billion. I'd have to double check the math on that one. But that drug failed the phase 3 testing. And most people at the time said, this is a really bad deal for Merck. But guess what we had in our pipeline? It was a drug called Keytruda. And Keytruda now is the largest drug in the world. And Merck, I think the sales this year are, let's say, mid-$20 billion a year. And they've had it for a long time, and they'll have it for at least a few more years. But they built probably the leading oncology portfolio around this pipeline product that we had that they really weren't even aware of when they bought us. And so the point I'm trying to make is big deals have lots of other value drivers that can come in and out. When you go out and you just buy one thing, it has to work.
Very risky.
It puts a lot of pressure on your diligence and your conviction that one thing you're doing is going to work. And so I tend to sweat the single product or the smaller deal generally.
Interesting.
More than I do the bigger deals.
Well, the other thing from somebody who's done a lot of smaller deals, certainly nowhere near the magnitude of yours, my guess is on the larger deals, the legal fees are a lot more. Because I've even noticed that in my world, when we were buying a $50 million company versus a $5 million company, the legal fees were 10 times as much, but the complexity of the deal was no different. It was
right.
Funny how the lawyers figure that out. And then the second thing is, my guess, you have a lot more regulatory antitrust hoops to jump through, correct?
That is correct, too.
So
yes.
I'm kind of curious, and you probably know who Lena Khan is, the woman that runs the FTC, and, with Trump winning the election. In our world, in venture capital, we've been kind of in our M&A world, we've been kind of in a lull or a bear market, if you will, for about 24 months. There really hasn't been a lot of M&A. Not a lot of IPOs in the tech world and the trickle-down effect from that. The private equity guys, even though they're all sitting on a lot of money, not a lot of them are being very acquisitive. Yep. Do you see that at your end of the spectrum, and do you see that changing? Because we're hopeful with the new administration, with Lena Khan hopefully being gone, and the people that Trump's bringing in, that we're going to really see 25 M&A, IPOs open up, M&A open up, and I'd be interested in your perspective on that whole.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think there was certainly a chilling effect in the M&A market with the position that Lena Khan and the FTC took under her leadership. And President-elect Trump has already nominated a new head of the FTC, so and that one doesn't seem so controversial. So it feels like that should get confirmation. And I do think a more normalized policy around antitrust is needed in the marketplace. I think going back and really looking at historic precedent and having by no means am I suggesting there should be a free pass and an open runway, but I do think a more predictable path, right, really following precedent and long established norms around antitrust policy, I think provides the market with a lot more credibility around attempting or thinking about M&A. And I think that's what's needed, right? And in fact, I say this across almost any regulatory structure. I think what people want is certainty to establish confidence. They don't want no rules. They just need to know what the rules are. And then they understand what they can and can't do in that environment.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when you look at investing, that's similar too. When there's a clear path instead of fog in front of you, people are going to make decisions because they know what's coming, right? Brent, being a high-powered executive in the healthcare world, I think that our listeners would be interested. What's a day in the life of Brent Saunders look like? Are you waking up Elon time? Was it 3:30 in the morning, or are you living more of a normal life like a Jeff Bezos? What's a day in the life of Brent Saunders look like?
Yeah, I outside of travel, which I don't do as much as by any stretch than I did pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I was on an airplane almost every day, and now I have a more normalized travel schedule, a few trips a month kind of thing. I really try to stick to a routine, so I usually get up about 5:45. I love my morning time, very quiet. I tend to, I run a global company, so it's there are things going on 24 hours most days of the week. And so I love to clear out emails, see what's happening around the world. I always read most of the Wall Street Journal. I'll look at my X account because I find that a great, easy source of news and updates of what's happening around the world. And then off to the gym, do an hour in the gym virtually every day. Quick shower and straight to the office. And I've been doing that routine now for, I guess 4 or 5 years. And I really don't like the days when that routine gets broken. And I was never a routine person, and now that I do it, I'm almost fanatical about that routine. So
Tom,
I was always an early riser.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I hate messing with my morning routine, and
right.
when you get off, like you said, once you get in the habit, then when you get off of it, it really kind of throws you for a loop. One of my questions is, if you look at, let's finish up on your day. So once you get to work and you're not traveling as much, is it pretty much meetings and phone calls all day, or?
Yeah, a lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls, but my management style is I like to check in with people, particularly business leaders around the world, spontaneously. What I don't like is, and my team knows this, I don't like the formal meeting with a PowerPoint and somebody's walking through, our business in Germany, for example. I'd rather call the general manager of Germany spontaneously and say, "Hey, how's it going?" And then ask 3-4 questions and see him. I think one, it saves time, because when you have these formal reviews as a CEO, particularly of a big company, people tend to spend a lot of time on production time, fancy graphs and perfecting their power, and that's a waste of time. And two, of course, anybody knows their business when they rehearse for it.
Yeah.
What I want to really see is my leaders know the business because they're in the business, right? And they should know they should be able to spontaneously respond to questions in the marketplace. And so in my free time, I'll tend to reach out to people I haven't connected with in a few weeks or a month and check in and see what's going on.
So ad hoc management, I like it. I was going to ask you about, we're big fans of the All In podcast. I don't know if you listen to that, David Sachs.
I do sometimes, yeah.
Jason Calacanis. We've actually had Jason on our pod. And David Freeberg, the scientist in the group, has talked about how he thinks that AI is going to change the whole pharma getting FDA approval of drugs process and tremendously shorten it. We're not going to have to involve people, human rats themselves, whatever, mice, I don't know what the hell they use. But I was talking to my friend playing golf the other day, who's a doctor, and he was, we were discussing it. He was like, "That's the craziest thing. I'm a big fan of technology." He's talking now, saying that's never going to happen. We're always going to have to do the human trials. It can be shortened with AI, but not like Freeberg saying. I'm just kind of curious how you look at that, being a big pharma guy. Do you see it AI radically changing that? I guess, what's it take to get an FDA approval now? Like 8 years, or what's the average, or something like that? Crazy.
Yeah, I think the number is 8 or 9 years and a few $1 billion for the average. And so I think the answer is somewhere in between the two. Ironically, I was just talking to my head of R&D, who sits in the office next door here in Miami, and we were talking about a program that we want to move into a late-stage human clinical trial next year. And he was just telling me that we're working with an AI firm to analyze all the previous trials that were done with this indication in this population, and then all the chemistry that we have in this particular drug to better predict how to design the clinical trial to get the best outcome. And so that was just a conversation, 30 minutes ago. But we also deploy AI in drug discovery. So we look at a big white space of retinal disease. So generally diseases of blindness, pretty severe. So AMD or geographic atrophy, pretty large problems for people who have it. And even with current therapy, you can delay progression, but ultimately you still lose vision or potentially even go blind. And so high quality of life, impact disease states. And they've been challenged, right? There haven't been really many novel mechanisms to look at that. But now we've got this massive AI database with lots of records of these patients, with actual tissue samples and other things like that. And so now we're running these calculations almost continuously at a speed that would have taken us, decades and decades in the past to look for novel targets to potentially solve these diseases. So I'm really optimistic on what AI can do for science and medicine over time. I think we're at the early innings of it today, but I think it's accelerating so rapidly that things that we thought were really almost impossible to solve scientific problems we'll see very solvable in just a few years.
Brent, piggybacking off of AI, when you look at public markets, really the best performing assets right behind AI have been some of these GLP-1 driven companies. You look at Eli Lilly and how that stock has done. Would love to get your take on GLP-1s and are we in a bubble? Like we always ask, are we in an AI bubble? Are we in a GLP-1 bubble? And there's a lot of pros and cons to these drugs, and I've seen it firsthand. Is it a good thing, or do the negatives outweigh the positives with this new type of drug? And I know it's been around for a while, but with the mass distribution we've seen really in the past 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, so I always say this as a general rule about all medicines or drugs. There are no free passes. There is no safe drug. Every drug has a risk and a benefit that needs to be weighed before you consider taking it. And, I'm very tough even with my kids and taking antibiotics or other things, because you really have to look at the benefit versus the risk. And if it's just getting healthier in one day faster from an ear infection versus, the risk of the antibiotic, why take it? And so I think everybody really has to be cautious and thoughtful and consult with their doctor around any medicine. When you look at the GLP-1 class, clearly, a miracle class of drugs. And I think we're only in early days of the impact of this new line of drug development and even going beyond the GLP-1s and perhaps combination therapies and others. For those that can't lose weight, right, and all the comorbidities of obesity, the GLP-1s are a really important option in the toolbox for those patients. And being able to solve obesity for many of those, solves their cardiovascular disease, it solves their diabetes, it solves so many, may even solve, some of the mental health issues that some may have. And so for those patients, it's really important. What worries me about that class of drugs is what I call the designer use of it. So somebody who just needs to lose 5 or 10 pounds and jumps on those drugs. Every time a friend or someone asks me about it, I'm like, why do it? Just figure out a better lifestyle program for yourself. And so that's the pause. I do think that as we move forward, that class of drugs will only grow larger, because I think we're going to get orals, right? Pills versus injections. So that will make it more accessible to people. I think the second thing we're looking at is combinations. So, when you lose weight, you lose fat and muscle together. And particularly for older people, losing muscle also creates danger, right? More falls, hip fractures, and other things like that. and so as we can start to be more selective about weight loss versus muscle loss, I think that is on the horizon. And then there are entirely new classes of drugs being studied that work with a different mechanism to target weight loss. Right, the GLP-1 class, to oversimplify it, really work by changing the response your brain has to food, the pleasure response, and making you feel full. And maybe it works on other, addictive types of things like alcoholism or others. Those studies are happening. So there's a lot yet to learn in this class, and that's really exciting. But I think the overuse of the class of drugs is something that has to be watched more carefully.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, we talked about Lena Khan and the new administration. Robert Kennedy Jr. is up for heading up the FDA. And A, do you think he'll be approved? And then he's obviously got some pretty radical thoughts around vaccinations, and one of the things I've heard him talk about, I'm sure you're more aware of this than I am, that, we pay too much for drugs in this country. That's been said for a long time, but he's going to fix that. How is your world looking at Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Do you want him to be approved? And if so, how that might impact, the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think that, when I talk to other people in the industry, and certainly my own views is I tried to take a fairly measured approach to it. I think there's some things that he talks about, like food safety and nutrition guidelines and other things like that certainly need to be rethought. When you look at policies in Europe or other places, it's eye-opening what we have as, in terms of ingredients. I think the fact that, school food guidelines say that a sugary cereal is healthier than 2 eggs just is a head scratcher for me. And when you look when those were passed in the 80s, you can look at the curve of obesity. And when the new guidelines came up, it's like a 45-degree angle straight up in terms of that curve. So there's a lot that needs to be rethought. I think with drug safety, the U.S. has the toughest and probably best in class drug safety program within the FDA. Right, the placebo-controlled study is the golden rule for drug safety, and risk benefit analysis is, I think, appropriately established. But I think more transparency is always a good thing, and providing more data around what these drugs do is always a positive thing.
What I'm curious of, Brett, and I don't know, I'm not well versed in this subject. Why do people in Canada and UK pay less for the same drugs and we pay more for them? Why is that?
Yeah, it's more or less trade policy. Think about it. The way it works today is if the U.S. for the most part has a free market pricing. Obviously, it's supply and demand, and then of course you have large payers that negotiate prices and other things like that. And it's a really complicated situation where the middlemen take a large chunk of the profitability of drugs, causing pricing to be high in the form of rebates. But what the foreign governments like Canada do is their government buys the drug, sets the price for the drug. And if you don't sell it to them, they have the right to compulsory license it. They will break your patents. And so they have the ultimate hammer, right? The ultimate threat. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, if it were another product, if it were steel, as an example, and the Canadian government was was forcing U.S. steel manufacturers to sell at a certain price, or if it were microchips or something else, there would be a trade war. But when it comes to because of the humanitarian issue around selling medicines, it's never risen to that. And so what has happened over the years, and this has been going on for decades, is that most of the R&D from around the world has moved to the U.S. 20 years ago, you'd find great R&D in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France. There would be so many great centers for R&D. now, it's shifted in a large way to the United States because this is the freest market for medicines. And so I think the thing we have to look at is how do we bring down the cost of medicines, because clearly we need to make them more accessible and affordable. But by that same token, the biotech pharmaceutical R&D centers that are here in the United States are a national treasure that should be protected and invested in. And so again, it's easy to tell the headline story for the news and make it sensational, but the problem's a little bit more complex, and I think it has to be solved more carefully.
Interesting.
Brent, want to bring the conversation back to the world that Tom and I live in, the VC world. I know that you're an active VC investor outside of your day-to-day role with Bausch and Lomb. Talk a little bit about what you enjoy investing in the VC market. I know you've invested with some amazing managers. Maybe some of those experiences and some of those great managers that you have invested with.
Yeah, so I love to invest with truly innovative companies or firms that really look for real innovation. I'm not looking to invest behind some incremental improvement on an idea that's 50 firms are looking at. I really like real innovation, something that has potentially a competitive moat around it, either strong intellectual property or really strong fast mover advantage that's hard to copy, or some other moat that can be built around the business. And then you guys know this, more so than anything, talent.
Yep.
Right? Invest
Always.
behind teams that are not only smart, but have chemistry and probably most importantly, have done it before together. And in fact, a Florida-based or Miami-based startup here, Rome, from Howard Lurman, who I think you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I'm chairman of his board, which is a huge opportunity for me. I've learned so much from Howard and the Rome team. But why did I get so excited about Rome? First of all, he's building something that's truly innovative. It has a great technological moat around it. But most importantly, he did it before at Yext. And he brought a lot of the team from Yext. So he had instant chemistry. And he tweeted or put on X this morning. It's funny you brought this up. Just this morning, I saw it at like 6:30 this morning as I was leaving for the gym. He tweeted that doing a startup the second time is a lot harder than he had thought. And I responded to his X tweet with it's kind of like the first one is climbing a hill, the second one is climbing Everest. But you have all your gear, the altitude, and you know what you need to bring. And so that wisdom you have from climbing the first hill is really your secret weapon. And he's got that in spades. That team has it in spades, and that's just it's just a great example of the types of companies I love to be associated with.
Well, it's interesting you say that. First off, we're huge fans of experienced founders. I wouldn't say it's a hard, fast rule, but if you look at our portfolio specifically over the last 5 or so years, 75% or more of the founders are experienced second-time founders. But the other thing that's interesting is that you say is we had a conversation with Sunira Madani, who is the founder of Worth AI, prior founder of Fat Merchant. She sold this company for $1.3 billion. And we asked her that question, is the second time that much easier than the first? And she said something very similar. I have the tools, I have the skill set, but now I have a lot more people that I have to impress with this. Before I didn't have the pressure. Now I have the pressure to say, hey, you've already done this once. Can you do it again? So it was interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And in fact, I think about it even in my being a CEO of a company, the second or third time, I put more pressure on myself to demand more of myself, right? All right, the first time I did, I was pretty good at it. The second time, damn it, this is myself to myself. I'm like, I got to be better the second time. Yeah. And the third time, I better be even better than that.
You always want to get better.
Yeah.
So the reverse is if I think that way, great entrepreneurs must think that way. So they're going to be tougher on themselves and their team and demand excellence. And it's great.
Tom, you want to get into the lightning round?
Yeah, we'll wrap up with the lightning round, Brent. This has been great. Again, this is just going to be 5 so quick questions, and we'll start with the AI because it's everywhere today. You can't get away from an AI discussion. Are we in an AI bubble?
Depends on how you define bubble. Maybe. Lots of winners, lots of losers.
Okay. Bitcoin just cracked over 100,000. I think it's 106 now is the high water mark. Where do you see the price of Bitcoin a year from now?
250,000. Not
all right.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next question going back to AI. So the Mag 7 is obviously spending billions and billions buying NVIDIA chips, building all these server farms, and really all over AI. Are they going to be the big winners when it comes to AI and the application of AI, or is it going to be the startups that usually make the quantum leap in what you were talking about, disruptive technologies?
Yeah, I think a few of them will be big winners. I think Meta or Facebook is one I'd probably bet on. I think OpenAI has a big first mover advantage as well, and then there are a whole bunch of others around it that I think will win. So I don't think all the Mag 7 will be huge winners. I think there'll be 50-50 there, and then there'll be a whole bunch of new ones that emerge that will move into that class.
Yeah, the one that puzzles me the most as I look at that whole is Google, because I think their search business, and as everybody, I think it is under such attack from ChatGPT and Perplexity and all these folks. I know I'm using a lot less Google search.
That's why I didn't say Google. I fully agree.
But when you look at Waymo and their autonomous vehicle, their division, they're leading in that. Their cloud business is really doing great. So
the quantum chip that they just came out with.
I think Tesla will dominate Waymo. As I best understand Waymo, they still have 2 or 3 techs watching each car. So they may have eliminated the driver, but they still have humans remotely watching each car. I think the data. Well, first, never bet against Elon Musk. That's kind of my favorite rule.
I think we've all learned that lesson.
But I think the amount of data and the amount of cars that Tesla has, I think they are going to be the long-term winner in driverless cars for sure. I would. In fact, I own Tesla, so I put my money where my mouth is on that one.
Yeah. So Kathy Wood would agree with you if you know who she is. She was our guest speaker at our summit last year.
That was your final question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or it's one of them, right?
Yeah, I was in the lightning round with her. This was at our summit, our investor summit we have every year. We'll have it coming up February 26th. In Tampa. And Brent, hopefully you can make it. It's for founders and investors. But I asked her if you could only own one stock, what would it be? And she said Tesla. So,
I wish you would have asked her what's the price of Tesla going to be at the like you asked me.
Well, I've seen her projections on that. That's kind of crazy. But I did ask her what the price of Bitcoin was going to be last February, and she said it'll hit 100,000 before the end of the year. So she called that.
All right. Well, she's a smart lady, so I agree.
Yeah, she's right more than half the time. Anyway,
that's that. In my book, that's smart.
So. Last question, AI, is it a job creator or a job destroyer?
I think it's a job reorganizer. I think that you'll see a reshuffling of the deck around the types of jobs that AI both destroys and creates, and probably net out even.
Got it. Brent, this has been great. Congratulations on all your success.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Hope everybody's off to a great start to 2025. Brent, once again, thank you. And to our audience, if you enjoyed today, please follow us on YouTube, subscribe, throw us a like, throw us a comment. And Tom, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Sax. Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Thanks for spending your time with Skin in the Game VC today. If you want to learn more about investing in early stage tech like a venture capitalist, be sure to visit the Florida Funders website at floridafunders.com. Join our angel network at no cost and get access to Florida Funders VC vetted investment opportunities in the next great breakout tech companies.